Super Mario 64 is a platform game developed and published by Nintendo for the Nintendo 64. It was released in Japan and in North America in 1996, and PAL regions in 1997. It is the first Super Mario game to feature 3D gameplay, combining traditional Super Mario gameplay, visual style, and characters in a large open world. In the game, Bowser, the primary antagonist of the Super Mario franchise, evades Princess Peach's castle and hides the castle's resources of protection, power stars, and in many different worlds inside the magical paintings. As Mario, the player collects power stats to unlock enough of Princess Peach's castle to get to Bowser and rescue her. Director Shigeru Miyamoto conceived the 3D Super Mario game during the production of Star Fox, which came out in 1993. Development lasted nearly 3 years, about 1 year on design and 20 months on production, starting with the design of the virtual camera system. The team continued illustrating the 3D character models, at the time a relatively unattempted task, and refining sprite movements. The sound effects were recorded by Yogi Ianaki, and the score was composed by Koji Kondo. Super Mario 64 was highly anticipated by video game journalists and audiences alike, boosted by the advertising campaigns and showings at the 1996 E3 trade show. It received critical acclaim, with reviewers praising its ambition, its visuals, and gameplay, though some criticized its virtual camera system. It is the best-selling Nintendo 64 game, with nearly 12 million copies sold by 2015. Retrospectively, Super Mario 64 has been considered one of the greatest video games of all time. Numerous developers have cited it as an influence on 3D platform games, with its dynamic camera system and 360-degree analog control establishing a new archetype for the genre, as much as Super Mario Bros. Did for a side-scrolling platform game. It was remade as Super Mario 64 DS on the Nintendo DS in 2004, and has been posted on other Nintendo consoles since. The game has attached a cult following, spawning many fan games and mods, a large speedrunning presence, enduring rumors surrounding the game's features, and challenging that attempt to beat the game with certain restrictions, such as not being allowed to press the A button, requiring a deep understanding about the game's mechanics and bugs. Now, as far as gameplay goes, the controls of Super Mario 64 is basically that it's a 3D platformer in which the player controls Mario through various courses. Mario's abilities are far more diverse than in previous games. He can walk, run, jump, crawl, climb, swim, kick, grab objects, and punch using the game's controls analog stick and buttons. He can execute special jumps by combining a regular jump with other actions, including the double and triple jumps, long jump, backflip, and wall jump. The player can adjust the camera, operated by a Lakitu broadcasting Mario, and toggle between the first-person and third-person view. So, with health, lives, and power-ups, unlike many of its predecessors, Super Mario 64 uses a health point system, represented by a pie shape consisting of 8 segments. If Mario has taken damage, he can replenish his health either by collecting 3 types of coins, which are yellow, which replenishes 1 segment, red equal to 2 yellow coins, and blue equal to 5 yellow coins, or by walking through a spinning heart. Underwater, Mario's health instead represents how long he can hold his breath, slowly diminishing while underwater and replenishing when he surfaces. As in previous Super Mario games, he starts with a number of extra lives, lost when its health is depleted and falls into bottomless pits. As the game ends, if Mario loses all of his lives, when Mario finishes a course, he gains a life with every 50 yellow coins the player has collected, and extra life mushrooms are hidden in various places such as the trees, and many chase Mario through the air and fall on the ground and disappear shortly if not collected. In absence of the power-ups normally found in previous games, such as the Super Mushroom, the Fire Flower, 3 colors of translucent blocks, red, green, and blue, appear throughout many stages. 3 switches of the same colors can be found in secret areas that turn their corresponding blocks solid and allow Mario to obtain 3 types of special cap power-ups. The wing cap allows Mario to fly after doing a triple jump or being shot from a cannon. The metal cap makes him immune to enemies, fire, noxious gases, allows him to withstand wind and water currents, perform on-land moves underwater, and have unlimited air capability underwater. And the The Vanish Cap renders him partially immaterial and invulnerable, and allows him to walk through some obstacles. A shell remains after stomping a Koopa Troopa, which Mario can use to surf on water, lava, and quicksand. The setting and objective of Mario 64 is the hub world that takes place in the Princess Peach's castle, which consists of 3 floors, a tower and a basement, plus a moat in a courtyard outside the castle. The player's main objective is to look for paintings that bring them to courses containing power stars, which upon their collection unlock more of the castle hub world. Each of the 15 courses has 7 power stars, and an additional 15 are hidden as secrets and as bonuses, for a total of 120 power stars in the game. The courses are filled with enemies as well as friendly creatures that provide assistance or ask favors, such as Bomb Buddies, who will allow Mario to access cannons on request. Some power stars only appear after completing certain tasks, often hinted at by the name of the course. These challenges include collecting 100 yellow coins or 8 red coins on a stage, defeating the boss, racing an opponent, and solving puzzles. The final level of the game is blocked by coins on a stage, defeating a boss. The final level of the game is blocked by endless stars, but Mario can bypass them by collecting 70 power stars. There are many hidden mini courses and other secrets within the castle, which may contain extra power stars required by the full completion of the game. If the player returns to the game after collecting all 120 power stars, Yoshi can be found on the roof of Princess Peach's castle, who will give the player a message from the developers, accompanied by 100 extra lives and an improved triple jump. The plot of the game is that the game begins with a letter from Princess Peach, inviting Mario to come to her castle for a cake, as she has baked for him. When he arrives, Mario discovers that Bowser has evaded the castle and imprisoned the princess in her servants with its walls, using the power of the castle's 120 power stars. The power stars are hidden in the castle's paintings, which serve as portals to other worlds where Bowser's minions keep watch over the stars. Mario explores the castle and enters these worlds, gaining access to more rooms as he recovers more stars. Mario unlocks 2 doors in different floors of the castle with keys obtained by defeating Bowser in hidden worlds. After getting at least 70 out of 120 stars, Mario breaks the curse of the endless stars that block the entrance to Bowser's final hiding place. After Mario defeats Bowser in the final battle, and Bowser escapes, swearing revenge, he obtains a special power star in which gives him the wing cap, and he flies back to the castle's courtyard. Princess Peach is released from the stained glass window and above the castle's entrance as she rewards Mario by kissing him on the nose and baking the cake she had promised him. Now, as far as development of the game goes, in the early 1990s, Super Mario creator Shigeru Miyamoto conceived a 3D Mario design while developing the game Star Fox in 1993 for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. Star Fox used the Super FX graphics chip, which added more processing power. Miyamoto considered using the chip to develop a Super Nintendo game, Super Mario FX, with gameplay based on an entire world of miniature trains. According to the engineer Dylan Cuthbert, who worked on Star Fox, Super Mario FX was never the title of a game, but was the codename of the Super FX chip itself. Miyamoto reformulated the idea from the Nintendo 64, not for its greater power, but because of its controller had more buttons for gameplay. At the January 1993 Consumer Electronics Show, or CES, where Star Fox made its debut, Nintendo booth demonstrated a talking 3D polygon animation of Mario's head. It returned to the start screen, programmed by Giles Goddard. Production of Super Mario 64 began on September 7, 1994, at Nintendo's Entertainment Analysis and Developments Division, and concluded on May 20th of 1996. According to Miyamoto, the development team consisted of around 15 to 20 people. Development began with the characters and the camera system. Months were spent on selecting a view and a layout. The original concept involved a fixed path and an asymmetric game such as Super Mario RPG, which moved to a free-roaming 3D view and layout, and with some linear paths, particularly in concrete with the players of Bowser's Lair. According to Giles Goddard. So Super Mario 64 is one of the first games of which Nintendo produced its illustrations internally instead of by outsourcing. The graphics were made by using N-World, a Silicon Graphics SGI-based toolkit. The development team prioritized Mario's movement, and before levels were created, tested, and refined Mario's animations on a sample grid. The 3D illustrations were created by Shigenami Hino, Hisashi Nogami, Hideki Fuji, Tomoaki Karume, and Usuki Nakano, and the game was animated by co-director Yoshikaki Kazumi and Satoru Kakizawa. Yoichi Katanabe, illustrator and character design for the Mario series, made a 3D drawing of Mario from various angles and directed the creation of the character models. In an interview with the Washington Post, Yoshiki Kozumi recalled that his challenge was animating the 3D models without any precedents. To assist players with depth perception, the team positioned a fox shadow directly beneath each object regardless of the area's lighting. Yoshikage Kozumi described the feature as an ironclad necessity, which might not be realistic, but it's much easier to play. Miyamoto's guiding design philosophy was to include more details in earlier games by using Nintendo 64's power to feature all the emotions of the characters. He likened the game's style of 3D interactive cartoon. Some details were inspired by the developers' personal lives. For example, the boos are based on an assistant director, Takashi Tezuka's wife, who, as Miyamoto explained, is very quiet normally, but one day she exploded, maddened by all the time Kazuya spent at work. Super Mario 64 was the first run on an SGI Onyx emulator, which only emulated the console's application programming interface, and not its hardware. The first test scenario of controls and physics involved Mario interacting with a golden rabbit named Mips. After Nintendo 64's MIPS architecture processors, the rabbit was included in the final game as a Power Star holder. Super Mario 64 features more puzzles than earlier Mario games. It was developed simultaneously with The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time, but as Ocarina of Time was released more than 2 years later, some puzzles were taken for Super Mario 64. The developers tried to include a multiplayer cooperative mode whereby players would control Mario and his brother Luigi in split screen, but could not make it work satisfactorily. The music was composed by veteran composer Koji Kondo, who created new interpretations of the familiar melodies from earlier media as well as new material. Yogi Nagaki was responsible for the sound design, tasked with producing hundreds of sound effects. He and Kondo felt that the music and sound effects were equally important. According to Inagaki, the average Nintendo 64 game had about 500 sound effects, and made comparisons to Ocarina of Time with 1,200, and The Legend of Zelda: Majora's Mask with 2,000. Super Mario 64 is one of the first games to feature Charles Martinet as the voice of Mario, and Leslie Swan, then senior editor of Nintendo Power, an English localizer for Super Mario 64, as the voice of Princess Peach. Upon its release, Super Mario 64 was the first shown and playable prototype in November of 1995 at Nintendo Space World. This version was only 50% complete and only about 2% of texture mapping was finished. It features nearly 32 courses. Miyamoto had hoped to create more, possibly up to 40, but it was ultimately reduced to 15. According to Nintendo of America chairman Howard Lincoln, Miyamoto's desire to add more was a major factor in the decision to delay the Nintendo 64 release from Christmas 1995 to summer of 1996. Nintendo president Hiroshi Hayamichi later said, "Game creators can finish games quickly if they compromise, but users have sharp eyes." They soon knew that if the games were compromised, Miyamoto asked for 2 more months, and I gave him unconditionally. The game was later shown at E3 in 1996, with multiple Nintendo 64 set up for people to play. According to Giles Goddard, the stress of the project caused some programmers to quit or move to different departments. As far as advertising and sales go, Peter Main, Nintendo's vice president of marketing at the time, stated that Super Mario 64 was meant as the killer app for the Nintendo 64. The 20 million marketing campaign included videotapes sent to more than 500,000 Nintendo Power subscribers and advertisements shown on MTV, Fox, and Nickelodeon. Super Mario 64 was officially released in Japan on June of 1996, in North America of September, and in Europe and Australia in March of 1997. During its first 3 months of sale in North America, it sold more than 2 million copies and grossed $140 million in the United States, becoming the best-selling video game of 1996. It was also the best-selling game overall from 1995 to 2002. During the first 3 months of 1997, it was the second best-selling console game at 523,000 units. By early 2001, it had sold 5.5 million units, and 5.5 by September of 2002. At the 1999 Milia Festival in Cannes, Super Mario 64 won a gold SSL prize for earning revenues above 21 million. In the European Union in 1998, it had become the second most popular game of Wii's Virtual Console by June of 2007, behind Super Mario Bros. By March of 2008, Super Mario 64 sold 11.8 million copies worldwide, being the best-selling Nintendo 64 game. And by 2015, Super Mario 64 was the 12th most sold Mario game, with 11.91 million units sold. Now, as far as re-releases are concerned, we've got Super Mario 64 DS. An enhanced remake, Super Mario 64 DS, was released by Nintendo DS in 2004. As with the original, the plot centers on collecting Power Stars and recruiting Princess Peach from Bowser. In a contrast with the original, Yoshi is the starting character, with Mario, Luigi, and Wario as an unlockable characters as well. It features improved graphics, slightly altered courses, new arenas, power-ups, and enemies, more Power Stars to collect, touchscreen mini-games, and a multiplayer mode. Reviews were mostly positive, with critics praising the graphics and add-ons to the original game, but criticizing the controls and multiplayer mode. By September of 2021, 11.6 million copies had been sold worldwide. A version of other re-releases include a version of Super Mario 64 was used as a tech demo for the Nintendo 64 disk drive, floppy drive, at the 1996 Nintendo Space World Trade Show. Like Wave Race 64, Super Mario 64 was re-released in Japan on July 18th of 1997 as Super Mario 64 Shindopakao version, which fixed various bugs, added support for the Rumble Pack peripheral, included the voice acting for the English version, among other changes. In November of 2003, it was ported to China's Ink Player, which was limited release demo. In late 2006, it was released in the Wii Virtual Console service, which added enhanced resolution and compatibility with the GameCube and Super Famicom Classic controllers. In September of 2020, Super Mario 64 was one of the 3 Super Mario games to be included in the Super Mario 3D All-Stars collection on Nintendo Switch. It made another Nintendo Switch appearance in October of 2021 as part of Nintendo 64's lineup for the Nintendo Switch Online Plus expansion pack. As far as reception goes, critical reviews of Super Mario 64 received enthusiastic pre-release reception. GamePro commented in the 1995 prototype's smoothness and how the action was a blast, despite the game being only 50% complete at the time. Ed Simrad of Electronic Gaming Monthly agreed, praising the new 3D animation of Mario characters shown in only 2D before. Larry Marcus, a source analyst for Alex and Brown & Sons, recalled Super Mario 64 being the most anticipated game of E3 of 1996, remembering a field of teenagers jolting for a test run. Super Mario 64 received critical acclaim with a score of 94 out of 100 from review aggregator Metacritic based on 13 reviews, and a score of 96% from review aggregator of Game Rankings based off of 22 reviews. The design variety of controls and use of the 3D gameplay received praise from video game publications. Maximum found its strongest point to where the freedom and its replayability, comparing it to Super Mario World and citing it as similar gimmick for allowing access to new areas upon finding switches. One of Game Fan's 4 reviewers, E Storm, cited the water levels as overjoying and showed how Super Mario 64 delved into an entirely new realm of gaming. Official Nintendo magazine called it beautiful on both looks and design. Doug Perry on IGN agreeing that it transitioned the series to 3D perfectly. Electronic Gaming Monthly discussed the levels in their initial review, praising them for their size and challenge, and later ranked it in the 4th best-selling console game of all time, arguing that it had breached the entire genre of 3D gaming while working virtually flawlessly. Computer and video games editor Paul Davies praised the 3D environment and said that if it enhanced the interaction and described the control scheme as intuitive and versatile. Total hailed the gameplay as being so imaginative and having such variety, and the reviewers were still hooked after 1 month. Writing for All Game, John T. Davies commented on the diversity of the gameplay and the abundance of activities found in each course. Nintendo Life's Corby Dillard agreed, calling the variety of the game's greatest genius. Writing for Game Revolution, Nebuzuka Redagovich described Super Mario 64 as one of the few true 3D platform games. N64 magazine likened it to an enormous playground to which the pleasure to experiment in, but optioned that the exploration element was slightly brought down by how many hints and tips there were. Victor Lucas of EP Daily agreed, praising the freedom, but suggesting players skip all the signposts. Super Mario 64 received praise for its graphics. GameSpot praised the graphics for being clean yet simple, and not distracting from the details of the game world. GamePro particularly praised the combination of unprecedented technological performance and art design, calling it the most virtually impressive game of all time. Paul Davies described the graphics as so amazing to see, you find yourself stopping to admire them, and John T. Davies called the visuals phenomenal and at the frame rate respectable. Doug Perry found the graphics simple but magnificent, a sentiment shared by Next Generation hyper reviewer Nero Allegrimopoulos called the best looking console game to date, and opined that its high resolution and frame rate for the time made it look indefinitely better than a cartoon. Total said that the graphics lacked of pixelation and jagged edges made it look like they were from a top of the range graphics workstation. The camera system received mixed reviews. Next Generation found the Super Mario 64 was less accessible than previous Mario games, frustrated by the camera's occasional erratic movements and lack of optimal angle. Nebojisa Rajagovic and Doug Perry added to the camera that was sometimes blocked by or went through objects. Electronic Gaming Monthly's Dan Hsu, John Smith, and Crispin Boyer all removed half a point from their scores, claiming that the camera sometimes could not move to a wanted angle or rapidly shifted in an understandable manner, or an undesirable manner. A criticism that returned in Electronic Gaming Monthly's 100 Best Games of All Times list. Game Informer stated that in their 2007 re-review, by present-day standards, the camera would almost be considered broken. Nintendo Power also noted that the learning curve of the shifting camera. In contrast, Corby Dillard claimed that the camera did not have any problems, and that it succeeded in helping the player traverse complex environments. This sentiment was shared by Total, claiming that there were very few occasions where the camera was at a suboptimal angle. Paul Davies acknowledged that he was critical of the camera, saying that in some occasions it was difficult to position ideally, but ultimately dismissed it as one hiccup of a revolutionary game. Awards. Super Mario 64 won numerous awards, including various Game of the Year honors by members of the gaming media and Nintendo's own best-selling Player's Choice selection. It has been placed high on some of the greatest games of all time lists by many reviewers, including IGN, Game Informer, Edge, Official Nintendo Magazine, Electronic Gaming Monthly, and Nintendo Power. Electronic Gaming Monthly awarded it as a gold award of its initial review, and it won Electronic Gaming's Monthly Game of the Year for both Editor's Pick and Reader's Pick. And Nintendo 64 awards the best use of innovative technology, best console game, and best game of 1996. Maximum gave it a Maximum Game of the Month award before its international release, ranking it the greatest game of the magazine had ever reviewed. Digitizer ranked it as the best game of 1997, above Final Fantasy VII as runner-up. As far as legacy goes, Super Mario 64 was key in the early access of the anticipation for the Nintendo 64. Lee Hutchinson, a former Babbage's employee, notes that the game was spurred by feverish video game press, and how the success of the game defied the rule that a variety of launch games was necessary to broad appeal. Eventually, the Nintendo 64 lost much of its market share to Sony's PlayStation, partially due to its cartridge and controller design decisions, which were reportedly implemented by Miyamoto for Super Mario 64. In 2012, Super Mario 64 was among the 80 entries in the Smithsonian American Art Museum's at the Art of Video Games exhibit. When it comes to influence, Super Mario 64 set many precedents for 3D platformers as one of the most influential video games. The game is known for its non-linear open freedom, which has been acclaimed by video game developers and journalists alike. OneUp.com voted that its central hub world, which provides a safe tutorial and a level selector, and how it's staple of the 3D platformer genre. As the genre evolved, many of the series' conventions were rethought drastically, placing emphasis on exploration over traditional platforming, jumping, or hop-to-hop action. Though some disputed its quality, others argued that it re-established an entity of new game genre into the series. Its mission based on level design inspired game designers such as GoldenEye 007, which came out in 1997, producer and director Martin Hollis, and the development of the team of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. Dan Houser, a prominent figure in the development of Grand Theft Auto series, stated that anyone who makes 3D games who says they've not borrowed something from Mario or Zelda of the Nintendo 64 is lying. Square Enix has stated that a coincidental meeting with Disney employees resulted in the creation of Kingdom Hearts series, inspired by Super Mario 64's use of 3D environments and exploration. Chris Sutherland, who served as a head designer for Banjo-Kazooie, agreed that Super Mario 64 set the benchmark for 3D platformers and claimed that any other game of the genre on the Nintendo 64 would inevitably be compared with Super Mario 64. Super Mario 64 introduced a free-floating camera that can be controlled independently of the character to increase freedom and exploration and fluid control in a 3D world. Super Mario 64 designers created a dynamic virtual video camera that turns and accelerates according to the character's actions. This camera system became the standard for 3D platformers. Nintendo Power praised the game's camera movements along with The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time's addition to the lock-on camera and concluded that the two games were trailblazers to the 3D era. PC Magazine's K. Thor Jensen considers Super Mario 64 to be the first truly realized 3D platformer with the integration of the camera control into its core gameplay, which he called the medium's true evolutionary leap. Super Mario 64's use of the analog stick was novel, offering more precise and wide-ranging character movements than the original D-pads of other consoles. At the time, 3D games were generally only allowed the player to either control the character in relation to a fixed camera angle or in relation to the character's perspective. Super Mario 64's controls, in contrast, are fully analog and interpret a 360-degree range of motion into navigation through a 3D space relative to the camera. The analog stick allows for precise control over subsidies such as running speed in 2005. Electronic Gaming Monthly ranked Super Mario 64 the most important game since they began publication in 1989, stating that there were 3D games before it. While there were 3D games before it, Nintendo was the first to get the control scheme right. In July of 2021, a pristine sealed copy of Super Mario 64 was auctioned for $1,560,000, the largest amount ever paid for a video game. Heritage Auctions video game specialist said, "It seems impossible to overstate the importance of this title, not only to the history of Mario and Nintendo, but to video games as a whole." When it comes to successors, a sequel was planned for the disk drive add-in under the codename Super Mario 128. In July of 1996, Nintendo insiders stated that Miyamoto was assembling a team consisting of mostly developers who had worked on Super Mario 64. Miyamoto affirmed that the work on the sequel had only commented at the time of the E3 1997 convention. The project was cancelled due to its lack of progress and the commercial failure of the N64 disk drive. Super Mario 64's successors include Super Mario Sunshine for the GameCube and Super Mario Galaxy for the Wii. Building on its core design of power-ups and its 3D, open-ended gameplay, Super Mario Galaxy 2 includes a remake of Super Mario 64's Whomp's Fortress level called Throwback Galaxy. Super Mario 3D Land and Super Mario World 3D World are departures from the open-ended design instead of focused on platforming reminiscent of 2D games. The Nintendo Switch game Super Mario Odyssey returns to Super Mario 64's open design. It includes numerous references to the letter. And Mario 64's suit and Mario 64's cap, which change Mario's appearance to a Super Mario 64, can be purchased after completing the main storyline. Additionally, Mario can travel to the Mushroom Kingdom, which includes Princess Peach's castle and its courtyard. The kingdom's power moons resemble Super Mario 64's Power Stars. But now we have rumors, conspiracy theories, and glitches. Rumors spread rapidly after the game's release. The most popular was a persuasive rumor that Luigi existed as an unlockable character. In 1996, IGN offered a prize of $100 to a player if they could find Luigi, to no avail. Fueling the rumor was a very blurry message on a statue in a courtyard of Princess Peach's castle, thought to say L is real in 2401. This was disproved in 1998 when a fan received a letter from Nintendo that the programming included the text as a joke and it was not supposed to say anything. In July of 2020, 24 years and 1 month later after the initial release of Super Mario 64, unused assets for Luigi from the scrapped multiplayer mode were discovered in the game's development files. In an event known as The Nintendo GigaLeak. Satirical conspiracy theories about the game became popular in 2020 and were grouped into Super Mario 64's Iceberg, an intentional meme of an iceberg, with its less likely theories representing places closer to the bottom of the ocean. One popular rumor involves Wario, apparition, based on an E3 of 1996 presentation with Charles Martinet voicing a disembodied Wario head. Some fans believe that the Wario head remained in some copies of the game. Conspiracy theorists also spread the rumor that early copies of Super Mario 64 is personalized, claiming that certain bizarre phenomenon existed in only certain copies of the game. In the years since the game's release, players have used glitches to reach previously unreachable parts of the game, including in 2014, a coin not meant to be collected. Speedrun techniques include the Lakitu skip, a glitch that disables a dialog box explaining camera movements, the Bob-omb clip, which uses a glitch in a bomb's explosion animation to clip through walls, and the backwards long jump glitch, which involves the player performing a repetitive move, the backwards long jump, allowing Mario to reach very high speed values, such as numerous applications in speedrunning. The latter was patched in 1997 in Shindo re-release. Super Mario 3D All-Stars re-release also patched this, and it was based on the Shinodu version. In 2013, YouTuber Vinesauce posted a compilation of various corruptions of the game, replicated with a program named Naughty. Another YouTuber, Penaconic 2012, creates highly technological and analytical videos of Super Mario 64's glitches and mechanics, which have been covered many times by the video game press. As far as Pan Project goes, there are none of them. There are a ton of them, but we're gonna skip this part because there are so many of them. But in terms of medical literature, in 2013 a study was conducted to see plasticity effects of the human brain after playing Super Mario 64, chosen by its navigation element and the ability to play a three-dimensional environment for at least 30 minutes every day for 2 months. The study concluded that doing the previously mentioned activity caused gray matter, or a major part of the central nervous system, to increase in the right hippocampal formation of the right disoriental prefrontal cortex. Brain areas thought to contribute to spatial navigation, working memory, and motor planning. Now, after reading all this, and after basically discussing the influence and the amount of impact that Super Mario 64 had back in the day, I can still remember it. Even though I'm 38 now, I can still remember it when I was 11. So when I was 11 years old, I did not have an N64. I was not able to get one. But overall, that was okay, though, because there was a neighbor friend of mine that actually did get one. And even though I hardly got to play, I remember going to his house. And when I actually did finally grab, for a temporary period of time, the controller and tried to move around with the controls, I remember how weird it felt. But at the same time, it was a learning process, and it became new but yet addictive. I actually criticized the controller because it just looked so different and so weird and everything. But once you got used to it, it was actually pretty praised. And at the end of the day, I remember the commercials that people that used to be put on TV, in terms of all the neighbors wanting to come to Timmy's house because he had Mario 64, and they asked him if he was home, and all the different footage they showed of the game, making it look super cool. Mario 64 was one of those games that is what I would call a GOAT game. It is one of the greatest games that was ever created, that span and influence that still goes on to this day. And having listened to retrospective videos and watched retrospective videos and done research on the game myself, and just reading other articles other than this one here, all these here that I just read to you, I find it very fascinating of how far we've come and where we used to be at one point to get to where we are today. It is really fascinating that all these years later, after 1996, all these years later, we're still using the same kind of movement and access to that movement with the kind of controllers that we're getting to have that 360-degree flexibility with so many games. Super Mario 64 inspired everybody. It inspired the competition, which was mainly Sony at the time, and it also inspired everybody that would follow, as well as the developers in terms of how they create their games. And back in 1996, or should I say starting in 1996, platformers were the thing. And today we have, let's say, Battle Royale, right? just to name one, really. Battle Royale really just, as far as multiplayer games and stuff like that go, really ended up being the thing as of in more recent times, right? But back then, it was all about platformers. And The Legend of Zelda basically created the same formula as well, right? The Legend of Zelda was absolutely huge. Both of those games, Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, were absolutely huge. And this is coming from somebody who is a Nintendo fan at heart and loves Nintendo at heart and grew up with Nintendo. That unfortunately, I did not have a Nintendo 64 system. Now, I do not regret that, because I was introduced to a whole bunch of other games and other franchises that I otherwise wouldn't have at the time, which I wouldn't take back for anything. But at the same time, yes, I do wish I had both. And if I did, I would have absolutely positively played the living hell out of Mario 64. And at this age right now, at age 38, I can wholeheartedly say without any reservation whatsoever that I absolutely positively enjoy watching retrospective videos that hold a ton of gameplay, or even just watching gameplays of it, really. And I go back and forth on whether or not I prefer commentary with the gameplays or not. But the game itself is fun to watch, and obviously it was fun to play. And whatever little time I had with the game, it was always a blast. And it made me wish to have an N64. But with that being said, though, I still love the game and enjoy the game despite the fact that I didn't have the game, if that makes any sense. It really just, it's a very interesting point of view to look at, and I wanted to share that with you guys at the end, towards the end of this video as of right now, along with everything else that we just discussed. Because when you're on the outside looking in, because back in the day you chose a different console, and all these years later you're kind of looking back on it, it really hits different. But for those people that did have an N64, I guarantee you that 90% or more of them had Mario 64. That Mario 64 basically had an even bigger impact than Donkey Kong had for the Super Nintendo. And Donkey Kong for the Super Nintendo absolutely had a huge impact. But Mario 64 was like that next level up. And I'm glad that Nintendo went the way they did with this. And even though the 40 levels were not released due to time constraints and everything else, I'm still happy that with Mario 64, that everybody that was able to get the game, and the console as well, I'm glad that they got what they got and we had the experiences that we had, because it really revolutionized gaming into what we got today. And we appreciate and we enjoy what we're getting today because of Super Mario 64. But with that being said, I want to know down in the comment section, for those of you guys that have made it this far, and I thank you very much, I want to know, what kind of impact has Super Mario 64 had on your life? What do you enjoy most about it? And even though if you never really had or played the game, what is it about that game that makes you wish you had it, or makes you, that you enjoy about it and respect about it? Let me know down in the comment section below. I'd love to have a discussion with you guys. And as always, I hope you enjoyed this, and I'll catch you later.